The wedding hall looked like something out of a dream. Soft golden lights hung from the ceiling. White flowers covered every table, and gentle music played in the background as guests laughed and talked. It was the kind of wedding people remembered for years. Everything had been planned perfectly. From the decorations to the food, nothing was left to chance. The bride and groom were busy greeting their guests, smiling until their cheeks hurt. They had waited a long time for this day, and now it was finally here. Family members took photos, children ran between tables, and the sound of happiness filled the room. The air felt warm and alive, like love itself was moving from person to person. Servers moved quickly and quietly through the hall, carrying trays of drinks and plates of food. Among them was a young waitress who had been working since early morning. She was tired but happy to be part of such a beautiful event. She had served many weddings before, but this one felt special. There was something calm and elegant about it. Near the corner of the hall stood a grand piano, polished and shining under the lights. It was placed there mostly for decoration. The hired musicians were scheduled to play later in the evening. For now, the piano sat silent, unnoticed by most of the guests who were too busy enjoying themselves. That was when the waitress noticed a man standing near the piano. He was not doing anything strange, just standing there quietly, watching the keys as if they meant something important to him. He looked to be in his late 40s or early 50s, dressed neatly in a dark suit. His clothes were simple but clean. Nothing about him screamed wealth or importance. What caught her attention was his expression. While everyone else was laughing or talking, this man looked thoughtful, almost lost in another world. His eyes rested on the piano with a mix of sadness and respect, like he was greeting an old friend he had not seen in years. The waitress assumed he might be a guest who loved music, maybe someone waiting for the musicians to arrive. She had seen similar people before, guests who liked to stand near the stage or instruments, hoping to get closer to the action, so she did not think much of it at first. As time passed, she noticed him again. He had not moved from that spot. Guests passed by him, laughter echoed around him. Yet he remained still, calm, and quiet. He did not check his phone or talk to anyone. He simply stood there, hands loosely at his sides, eyes focused on the piano. Some guests whispered about him. A few gave him curious looks, wondering who he was and why he seemed so distant. Others ignored him completely, assuming he was just another guest enjoying the wedding in his own way. No one imagined he would matter to the story of the night. The waitress finally walked past him while serving drinks. She offered a polite smile. He returned it kindly. His smile was gentle and respectful, not demanding or proud. It felt sincere. She felt a strange sense of calm around him, though she could not explain why. At that moment, the wedding continued as planned. Music played softly, glasses clinked, and laughter filled the air. No one knew that this quiet man, standing near the piano, was about to change the entire mood of the evening. For now, he was just an unexpected guest in an elegant wedding, unnoticed, silent, and holding a story no one was ready for yet. The moment came quietly, almost too quietly for anyone to notice at first. The reception was moving smoothly, guests were laughing, glasses were being refilled, and plates were slowly being cleared from the tables. The soft background music continued as planned, blending into the joyful noise of the room. The man near the piano finally moved. He took a slow breath as if preparing himself, then gently stepped away from the corner and looked around the hall. His eyes stopped on the waitress who had smiled at him earlier. She was walking past with a tray of empty glasses, her steps quick but tired. He waited until she was close enough, then spoke in a calm and polite voice. His tone was low, almost careful, as told her he did not want to disturb anyone. He simply asked if he could speak with her for a moment. The waitress paused, slightly surprised. Guests usually asked for drinks or directions, not quiet conversations. Still, she nodded and leaned in to hear him better. The music and chatter made it hard to catch every word. He glanced toward the piano before looking back at her, then asked if it would be possible for him to play it for just a few minutes. Nothing long, nothing dramatic, just a short piece. For a second, she thought she had misunderstood him. She blinked and looked at the piano, then back at the man. Her face showed uncertainty. Guests were not allowed to touch the instruments, especially at a wedding. Everything had rules, everything had timing. She hesitated, unsure how to respond. The musicians had not arrived yet, but the piano was part of the arrangement, not a toy, not something anyone could simply walk up to and play. She had seen problems start from smaller things than this. Around them, a few nearby guests overheard the request. One woman raised her eyebrow. Another man quietly laughed under his breath. Some assumed the guest was joking. Others thought he was being rude. A wedding was not the place for random performances. The waitress felt pressure building on her shoulders. She did not want to offend a guest. But she also did not want to break the rules or upset the bride and groom. Her mind raced as she searched for the safest answer. She asked him gently if he was a professional musician. Hoping that might make the decision easier, the man smiled slightly and shook his head, not in denial, but as if the question itself carried too much weight. He simply said he had played before, long ago. That answer did not help her at all. It made the situation even stranger. Guests nearby continued watching, curiosity spreading slowly. Some whispered, wondering what was happening. Others prepared themselves for disappointment. Assuming the man would soon be turned away, the waitress looked again at the man's face. There was no arrogance in his eyes, no desire for attention. He did not look like someone trying to steal the spotlight. He looked like someone asking for permission, not applause. She noticed his hands, steady but slightly tense, as if they remembered something important, something they had not done in a long time. There was a quiet seriousness about him that made her pause. After a moment that felt longer than it really was, she gave a careful nod. She told him he could play, but only for a short time, and only if he stopped the moment someone objected. Her voice was firm but kind. The man thanked her sincerely, not with excitement, but with relief, like someone who had just been given permission to breathe again. He did not rush to the piano. Instead, he walked slowly, respecting the space, respecting the moment. Nearby guests exchanged looks, some amused, some doubtful, others already bored. No one expected much to them. It was just a strange interruption in an otherwise perfect evening. The waitress stepped back, her heart beating faster than usual. She did not know why she agreed, but something told her this was not a mistake. Still, she prepared herself for complaints, for awkward silence, for embarrassment. What she did not know was that this simple request, made in a soft voice and answered with hesitation, was about to turn the wedding into something no one in that hall would ever forget. The man sat down on the piano bench slowly, as if he was afraid the moment might break if he moved too fast. The bench made a soft sound as he adjusted himself, and a few nearby guests glanced over for a second before turning back to their conversations. No one expected anything special to happen. The hall was still full of noise, people talking, laughing, glasses clinking, a baby crying somewhere near the back. The background music had faded, but the room itself was loud enough. The piano felt like just another decoration sitting quietly in the corner. The man placed his hands above the keys but did not touch them yet. He closed his eyes for a brief moment, taking a deep breath. His shoulders rose slightly and then relaxed, as if he was calming his heart. The waitress stood a few steps away, watching nervously, her tray held tightly in her hands. She wondered if she had made a mistake by saying yes. She imagined guests complaining or the wedding planner getting angry. Her stomach felt tight. Then the first note was played. It was soft, almost too soft to hear. A single clear sound that gently cut through the noise of the room. It did not demand attention. It simply existed. A second note followed, then a third, slow and careful. The melody began to form quietly, like a whisper. Some guests did not notice at all, but others felt something change without knowing why. The man's fingers moved smoothly across the keys. Not fast, not slow, just steady. Each note felt intentional, like it had a purpose. The sound was warm and emotional, different from the background music people were used to hearing. At one table, a woman paused mid-sentence, her fork stopping halfway to her mouth. She tilted her head slightly, listening. At another table, a man frowned in confusion, wondering where the sound was coming from. The noise in the hall did not stop all at once. It faded gradually. Conversations grew quieter. Laughter softened. People began to turn their heads toward the piano without realizing they were doing it. The melody grew stronger, not louder, but deeper. It carried a feeling that was hard to explain. It sounded like memory, like loss, like hope mixed together. It did not feel like wedding music, yet it fit perfectly. The waitress felt goosebumps rise on her arms, her nervousness slowly turning into something else, something close to awe. She forgot about the rules, forgot about her job for a moment. She was simply listening. The man played as if the room no longer existed. His eyes remained closed. His face calm but serious. Every movement of his hands felt natural, like they had been waiting for this moment for years. Guests who had been doubtful now leaned forward in their seats. Whispers stopped completely near the piano. Even the kitchen staff paused at the doors, drawn in by the sound. The bride noticed the change first. She looked around, confused by the sudden quiet, then followed the direction of everyone's gaze. When she saw the man at the piano, her surprise quickly turned into curiosity. The groom reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. Neither of them spoke. They simply listened, feeling something unexpected settle over their celebration. The music continued, flowing smoothly, filling the space between people. It felt personal, like the man was telling a story without words, a story only his hands could explain. By the time the melody reached its most emotional part, the hall had fallen into near silence. Every guest now faced the piano, fully present, fully aware that something rare was happening. What began as a few quiet notes had slowly taken control of the entire room, without force, without announcement. And in that moment, everyone understood they were witnessing something far more powerful than a simple performance. Even if they did not yet know why. The change happened so slowly that no one could say the exact moment it began. 1 second the hall was full of soft noise. The next it felt like the air itself had stopped moving. The music from the piano grew deeper, not louder. Yet it somehow reached every corner of the room. Guests who had been talking moments ago now sat still, their voices fading into nothing. Even the sound of chairs moving and glasses touching stopped. It was as if an invisible hand had gently asked everyone to be quiet. And without realizing it, they all obeyed. The hall fell silent. Not the uncomfortable kind of silence, but a heavy and emotional one. The kind that makes people afraid to breathe too loudly. The waitress felt her heart beating clearly in her chest. She had served many weddings, heard many songs, but she had never felt anything like this before. She stood frozen, her eyes fixed on the man at the piano. The man continued to play with his eyes closed, unaware or uncaring of the attention he now held. His fingers moved with confidence, but there was sadness in the way they pressed the keys, as if each note carried a memory he could not forget. Some guests felt their throats tighten. Others felt their eyes burn with sudden tears they did not expect. No one spoke. No one dared to interrupt. An older woman near the front slowly placed her hand over her mouth, her eyes wide. She had heard this style of music before, long ago. It reminded her of concerts she attended in her youth, moments she thought were gone forever. The bride stood perfectly still. Her smile had faded into a soft, emotional expression. She forgot about the guests, the cameras, even the celebration itself. The music had pulled her into something deeper, something honest. The groom noticed the way her hand trembled slightly in his, and he held it tighter, both of them listening as if the music was speaking directly to them. Even the children stopped moving. One small boy who had been running around sat down quietly beside his mother, confused but calm, sensing the seriousness of the moment. The piano notes seemed to stretch time itself. Seconds felt longer, heavier, meaningful. The room no longer felt like a wedding hall. It felt like a shared memory, something everyone was part of together. The waitress suddenly understood why the man had asked so politely, why his voice had carried no confidence or pride. He was not performing. He was releasing something he had been holding inside for years. She felt a wave of guilt for doubting him, for thinking of rules instead of feelings. Yet she also felt grateful that she had not said no. The staff members near the doors exchanged quiet looks. No words were needed. They all felt it. This was not planned, but it was real. As the melody reached its most powerful point, the silence became complete. No coughing, no shifting, no whispers. Only the piano existed. In that silence, people reflected without trying. Some thought of loved ones they had lost. Others thought of dreams they had once abandoned. The music touched places words could not reach. The man's hands trembled slightly for the first time. But he did not stop. He pressed forward, letting the final notes fall gently into the quiet hall. When the last note faded, it did not disappear immediately. It hung in the air, refusing to leave, as if the hall itself was holding on to it. No one clapped, not yet. It felt wrong to break the silence too quickly. Everyone remained still, aware that they had just shared something rare and deeply human. In that moment, the wedding was no longer just a celebration of love between two people. It had become a place where a hidden story was revealed without a single word being spoken. For a few long seconds after the final note faded, no one moved. The silence felt thick, almost sacred, like breaking it would ruin something fragile. People looked at one another with wide eyes, unsure of what they had just experienced. Then a soft gasp came from one of the front tables. An elderly man slowly stood up, his chair scraping lightly against the floor. The sound felt too loud in the quiet hall. Several heads turned toward him. He stared at the man at the piano, his face pale, his lips slightly open, as if he was seeing a ghost. His hands trembled as he rested one on the table for support. "I know that style," he whispered, though his voice carried farther than he expected. "I have not heard it played that way in decades." A ripple of confusion moved through the guests. Whispers began again, low and careful. People leaned toward each other, asking silent questions with their eyes. The man at the piano slowly opened his eyes. He looked tired now, as if the music had taken something from him. He stood up gently, nodding once toward the piano, clearly ready to step away. But the older man took a step forward, his eyes never leaving the pianist. Memories were flooding back too fast. Concerts from long ago. A name printed on old programs. A talent people once talked about with respect and awe. Others began to notice the change in his expression. The shock, the recognition. It made them curious, uneasy. A woman near the back covered her mouth, suddenly remembering stories her father used to tell about a gifted pianist who disappeared after a tragedy. She looked from the old man to the pianist, her heart starting to race. The bride sensed the shift in the room, something bigger than surprise, something closer to disbelief. She stepped forward slightly, her dress brushing softly against the floor, her eyes fixed on the man who had changed her wedding without meaning to. "Do you know him?" she asked quietly, her voice gentle but clear. The elderly man swallowed hard before answering. "I believe I do," he said slowly. "Or at least I know who he was." That sentence alone sent a wave through the room. Guests leaned forward, their earlier doubt now replaced by intense curiosity. Phones were forgotten, drinks untouched. The waitress felt her legs weaken, her mind replaying every second of doubt she had felt earlier. She realized she might have allowed someone extraordinary to sit at that piano, someone with a past far bigger than she imagined. The pianist shifted uncomfortably, clearly not wanting attention. He avoided eye contact, as if hoping the moment would pass, but it did not. A few guests began whispering names, unsure but excited, connecting pieces of memory. Music lovers recognizing technique, emotion, discipline that could only come from years of mastery. "He plays like someone trained for a lifetime," one man murmured. "Not like a guest showing off." The groom finally spoke, his voice calm but filled with respect. "Sir," he said, "would you mind telling us who you are?" The pianist hesitated, his jaw tightening. He looked at the piano once more, then at the faces watching him, faces filled not with judgment, but wonder. "I am no one special anymore," he said quietly, his voice steady but heavy. "Just someone who used to play." That answer only deepened the shock, because no one who played like that could ever be just anyone. The recognition settled fully now. This was not an interruption, not a mistake. It was a moment crossing paths with history, with loss, with talent hidden by time. The hall buzzed softly again. Not with noise, but with realization. People understood they had witnessed something rare, something they would talk about for years. And standing in the center of it all was the man who never meant to be seen, now exposed not by words, but by the truth carried in his music. The room waited, every face turned toward the man who stood beside the piano. The quiet felt heavier now, filled with questions that no one knew how to ask properly. The pianist took a slow breath, his shoulders rising and falling. He looked older in that moment, not because of his age, but because of the weight he carried. He glanced at the bride and groom first, then at the guests, Finally his eyes settled on the piano keys once more, as if they were the only thing that truly understood him. "I did not plan for this," he said softly, his voice calm but worn. "I did not come here to be noticed." People leaned in slightly, afraid to miss a single word. He explained that many years ago, music had been his entire life. He practiced from morning until night, performed in large halls, and traveled more than he stayed home. The piano was not just an instrument to him, it was his voice, his purpose. Some guests nodded slowly, the pieces beginning to connect in their minds. He went on to say that his life changed in a single moment, a personal loss so deep that it broke something inside him. He did not share details, he did not need to. The pain in his eyes said enough. After that tragedy, he walked away from music completely. He stopped performing, stopped teaching, stopped even touching a piano. It reminded him too much of everything he had lost. The hall remained silent, but this time the silence felt different. It felt understanding. He told them that he had attended the wedding only because he was a distant friend of the family. He had no intention of playing, no intention of revisiting the past. "But when I saw the piano," he said, his voice lowering, "something inside me woke up." He admitted that he stood there for a long time, arguing with himself, knowing he should walk away, knowing it would hurt, but also knowing it might be his last chance to feel connected to who he once was. The waitress felt tears forming in her eyes. She now understood the tension she had seen in his hands, the sadness in his gaze. He explained that asking to play was not about showing skill, it was about closure, about saying goodbye to a part of his life he had buried without ever properly facing. "I needed to know if the music was still there," he said quietly, "and if I was still there with it." The bride stepped closer, her voice gentle, telling him that what he gave them was not an interruption, but a gift, something no planned performance could ever replace. Other guests nodded, some openly wiping their eyes, others pressing their lips together, holding emotion inside. The older man who first recognized him spoke again, confirming what many now suspected. He shared that the pianist had once been admired, respected, and talked about with great hope, before disappearing without explanation. The pianist listened without pride, without denial. He simply accepted it, as if that version of himself belonged to another lifetime. He said that tonight was the first time in many years he had allowed himself to feel the music fully, and that while it hurt, it also healed something he thought was gone forever. "I do not know if I will ever play again," he admitted, "but tonight reminded me that I am still alive." Those words settled deep into the hearts of everyone listening. No one rushed him, no one pushed for more answers. They respected the boundaries he set, understanding that some truths did not need full explanation. The truth had come out gently, not as a dramatic reveal, but as a quiet confession, spoken with honesty and humility. And in that moment, the man was no longer a mystery or a surprise guest. He was simply a human being who had found his way back to a lost part of himself, if only for a few minutes. The moment his words settled into the room, something changed in the hearts of the people listening. The silence was no longer heavy, it was warm, filled with shared emotion, as if everyone had taken the same deep breath together. A woman near the center of the hall quietly wiped tears from her cheeks, surprised by her own reaction. She had come to celebrate a wedding, not to feel memories she thought were long forgotten. Yet here they were, rising without permission. Another guest lowered his head, staring at his hands, thinking about the dreams he once chased but later abandoned. The man's story felt too familiar. Even though their lives were very different, the bride took a few slow steps forward, her dress softly brushing the floor. She smiled at the pianist. Not the polite wedding smile meant for photos, but a real one, full of gratitude and emotion. She thanked him for sharing something so personal, telling him that the music had made their day even more meaningful. The groom nodded beside her, his eyes shining. He admitted that he would remember that moment for the rest of his life. Not because it was planned, but because it was real. The waitress finally allowed herself to relax, her shoulders dropping as if a weight had been lifted. She felt proud and humbled at the same time. Proud that she had trusted her instinct, and humbled by how close she came to saying no. She stepped closer and apologized softly for doubting him earlier, her voice shaking slightly. The man looked at her and smiled kindly. telling her there was nothing to apologize for. Some doors are meant to open slowly, he said. Around them, guests began to speak again, but quietly, carefully, as if the room itself deserved respect. Laughter returned, but softer, gentler. People hugged each other for no clear reason. A few guests approached the pianist, not asking for photos or autographs, but simply to shake his hand, to thank him, to tell him how the music made them feel. He listened patiently, nodding, never acting like someone special. One elderly woman told him the melody reminded her of her late husband, and for the first time in years, the memory did not hurt as much. The man held her hand for a moment, saying nothing, understanding more than words could express. The pianist slowly stepped away from the piano, his hands still slightly trembling, but his face looked lighter, like something heavy had finally been set down. The band arrived later than planned, setting up their instruments, unaware that the most powerful performance of the night had already happened. When they began to play, the music was joyful, lively, and perfect for dancing. Yet something remained different. Guests danced with more feeling, smiled with more honesty. As if the earlier moment had opened something inside them, the waitress watched the pianist from across the room, noticing how he now blended back into the crowd. No longer the center of attention, just another guest again. But changed. She wondered how many people around her carried stories just as deep, talents just as hidden, waiting for the right moment to surface. As the night went on, the wedding returned to celebration, to laughter, to love. But the emotional mark left by the piano never faded. It became the quiet heartbeat of the evening. People would later say that something magical happened at that wedding, something they could not fully explain, only feel. And for the man who once walked away from music, that night did not promise a new beginning, but it offered something just as important: peace. He did not need applause or recognition. The real reward was the calm in his chest, the feeling that he had honored his past without being trapped by it. As he stood there, watching people dance and laugh, he realized that sometimes healing does not come from starting over, but from allowing yourself to feel one honest moment and letting it go. As the evening slowly moved toward its end, the wedding hall no longer felt the same as it had at the beginning. Something invisible but powerful had settled into the space, like a shared secret everyone carried in their hearts. Guests continued to laugh, dance, and celebrate. Yet many of them kept glancing toward the piano from time to time, as if expecting it to speak again, even though it remained silent. The bride and groom made their rounds, thanking everyone for coming, but again and again, guests stopped them to mention the music, telling them how that moment had touched them deeply, how it made the wedding feel unforgettable. The couple listened with soft smiles, realizing that something unplanned had become the soul of their special day. The pianist stayed in the background, standing near the edge of the hall, watching life move around him. He did not seek attention, and he did not avoid it either. He simply existed within the moment, calm and quiet. A few people still approached him before leaving, not to ask questions, but to say goodbye, to thank him one last time. Their words were simple, but their eyes said more than enough. Outside the hall, the night air was cool and peaceful. Fairy lights glowed softly near the entrance. Guests gathered for final photos, laughter echoing gently into the dark. When it was time to leave, the pianist stepped out alone, the sounds of celebration fading behind him. He paused for a moment, taking a deep breath, feeling lighter than he had in years. He did not know what tomorrow would bring, whether music would return to his life or remain a memory. But for the first time in a long while, he was at peace with not knowing. Inside the hall, the waitress watched him go, a quiet smile on her face. She knew she would remember this night forever, not because of the tips or the decorations, but because she had witnessed how one small decision could change everything. She would later tell friends about the wedding where a quiet man played the piano and made time stand still. She would remind herself to trust her instincts, to look beyond appearances. The guests would talk about it for years, some calling it fate, others calling it coincidence, but all agreeing it was something rare, something real. The bride and groom would look back on their wedding day and smile, knowing that their celebration had become part of someone else's healing, and that made their love feel even more meaningful. As the lights dimmed and the last song played, the piano stood quietly in the corner once again, just a polished instrument under soft lights, yet no longer ordinary. It had carried a story that night, a story of loss, courage, and release, without saying a single word. And though the wedding ended, the feeling it created did not. It traveled home with each guest, living on in memories, conversations, and quiet reflections. For the man who once walked away from music, that night did not rewrite his past, but it gently closed a chapter he had left unfinished. Sometimes, life does not ask for grand changes. It asks for one honest moment, one brave step, and one chance to let go. That wedding was not remembered because everything went perfectly. It was remembered because something unexpected reminded everyone that beauty often arrives quietly, and somewhere, long after the guests had gone home, the echo of those piano notes still lived on, not in the hall, but in the hearts of all who were there.